Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 210, Sandhagen vs. Song, also known as UFC Vegas 60. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com, and with me, as always, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good. It's so funny. I'm listening to you talk about the numbers, UFC 2, whatever, and UFC Vegas. Like, they're both wrong. You know, like, this is not the 200th event. You know, it's not the 60th time they've been in Vegas. They've been in Vegas. Like, let's ignore all those other times before the Performance Center. You know,
I agree. It's a meaningless numbering system. I wish we could get onto something standardized so that different news outlets, so that different databases, so that we in Tapology use the same system. So that, because like Wikipedia copies Sherdog's system, so they call this event UFC Fight Night 210. It's not the 210th Fight Night. No. Like, were all those UFC on FX and UFC on Fox not also Fight Nights? Of course they were. Yeah. And they were all in Vegas too. It's
the UFC on Versus.
It's a nightmare.
Why can't we just call it UFC Sandhagen versus Yadong or whatever so the fighters can actually argue who's the A side like they do in boxing.
It would make too much sense.
Yeah, so that's why.
And
we have 15 fights to talk about. Let's not go to. We have other shows to go down this road.
If we just called them that, like called them by the headliners, and then for database purposes, just number them by this is the number either of the free event or the pay-per-view event.
Okay.
You know, for our own putting it in order, that would be lovely.
It's a great idea that we have 15 fights let's change the entire structure of the events.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, we got 15 fights here. What's your letter grade looking at this one in advance, knowing it's a free card?
Yeah,
what's your level of anticipation?
Yeah, it's tough always following a UFC pay-per-view. That's always tough because you don't have the embedded, you don't have the press conferences, you don't have all the things to get really excited for. When I'm walking around work, I don't have all these people asking me about it compared to like pay-per-views. But for a fight night, I think it's pretty solid. I love the main event. It doesn't hold too much weight in the division, being that 135 is so backlogged right now. I mean, you got Dillashaw fighting for the title, and then Cejudo's coming back, and Marlon Vera deserves a title shot, and there's somebody else I'm not thinking of that's right there. Jan versus O'Malley winner. Yeah. And then if Yadong can beat Sandhagen, he's right in there. So they kind of further down the list. But stylistically, it is such a fun fight. And there's a lot of fun prospects on this fight. There's a lot of, even some of the matchups that aren't the best fighters, they matched well. So I give it like a B-.
I'm with you. I was thinking B, I could go B-. As 15 fight cards go, as you point out, this one is pretty solid. There have been some 15 fight cards. Like there's one that we talked about, and I think I compared it to Golden Corral. Do they have Golden Corral in New England?
Yeah.
Okay. Where it's like,
hold on. No, we don't have them in New England, but when I was in Virginia, we went to Golden Corral. It's like, okay. Listen, I know people say how nasty Golden Corral. Listen, the Shillan family loves some Golden Corral. Like I go up there, man. If I'm not throwing up in the parking lot, I want to walk it out. I didn't get my money's worth. I just man. I always sit there. I go, well, how do they make any money in this place? Like, I just had my fourth piece of steak. What's going on?
See, so Keith will get this analogy because at Golden Corral, it's like, well, none of this stuff is that great, but man, there sure is a lot of it. And that's what some of the other 15 fight cards have been like this year. But this one is like going to like the little more upscale buffet, okay. You're pretty much everything is like, I could take some of that. My only complaint, if I had one, is that this fight card didn't have to be 15 fights. There are 3 fights on this card with a late notice replacement where they could have just let it to fall to 14 or 13 or 12. Yeah. 12 is perfectly manageable, but they were like, no, we have to have someone to fight Mariya Agapova. We have to get Andre.
The fans demand it.
Yeah, the fans. I mean, I demand it. Maybe we'll see something hilarious.
Hold on. I hope we're at the same. Who's fighting Agapova? I hope we're at the same.
Gillian Robertson.
Okay. I make sure there was another change that I missed.
Yeah. And then there are 2 more fights in this card that were pushed to September 17th from earlier dates, like Bozer versus Nascimento, Ladd versus McMahon were pushed to this card from another card. So this didn't have to be 15 fights, but it is. And for a 15-fight card, it ain't bad, as you pointed out.
Yeah, but I also I didn't have to go up for another plate of chicken wings, but I did.
Yeah, and I mean, you're walking by the potatoes. You might as well just slop them on the corner of your plate. It's a wasted trip.
I'm a grown man, so I don't eat a lot of pudding, but when I'm at Golden Corral, we'll grab pudding, a little bit of cheesecake. Yeah.
Keith gets it. Any other thoughts about this before we dive into the enormously long prelim card?
Let's do it.
We head to the women's strawweight division for a matchup between Loma Lookboonmee and Denise Gomes. Lookboonmee, the one who officially is Konklak Suphisara, 26-year-old Thai, 6-3 overall, 3-2 since joining the UFC out of Invicta Fighting Championships. She is coming off a loss. She dropped a unanimous decision to Lupi Godinez last November at UFC Fight Night Vieira versus Tate. Prior to that, she had won back-to-back unanimous decisions over Jin Yufrei and Sam Hughes. She'll try to get back on the win. She'll try to get back in the win column against Gomes. The 22-year-old Brazilian is 6-1 overall. That is 6 wins in a row after losing her debut, so she's on a 6-fight win streak. Most recently fought just 2 weeks ago at Dana White's Contender Series on August 23rd, where she took a unanimous decision over Rayane dos Santos. Prior to that, she had a third-round TKO of Milana Dudieva at Invicta back in March. Dudieva, of course, also a UFC veteran. She'll try to make it 7 straight here. She is not favored to do so. She is plus 220. Loma around minus 260 as the favorite. Gomes is in for Diana Belbitsa. This was going to be Loma versus Belbitsa, which would have been a fun matchup of a more European-style kickboxer versus obviously a decorated Muay Thai striker. Instead, we get Gomes versus Loma. It's definitely a different clash of styles. Gomes is a Parana Valetudo product, so she's a teammate of Jessica Andrade. And it seems like all the women that come out of that camp, they come from the same basic mold as Andrade, like a stocky, powerful woman that runs on power and athleticism and just incorporates different parts of her game. Like Carl Hosa, has certain parts of that game. Gomes has certain parts of that game. From what I've seen of her, both in Invicta and on the Contender Series, she prefers to be the bang it out on the feet version of Andrade, and she used it to pretty good effect. I mean, she is big and strong. She's not quite as stocky and fire plug like as Hosa or Andrade, but she's built, and she was able to bully around Dudieva, who always has had trouble with physical bullies. It was a close competitive fight with Dos Santos, but she arguably won all 3 rounds, definitely won at least 2. And just was the physically stronger woman in the clinch, was able to fight off Dos Santos takedowns for the most part and just keep this thing standing. My main concern is that was 2 weeks ago. She looks like a woman who has a substantial cut to get to 115. I mean, she fought at 125 numerous times in Brazil. So she's making this cut again, and I think it's exactly 2 weeks and 3 days or something, because obviously it's from Tuesday night to, but that concerns me. Otherwise, this is a sneaky tough fight for Loma. I feel as though the die is kind of cast for Loma Lookboonmee at the UFC level. She's tiny. She's really, really small. She's short, and while she's not skinny, she's kind of compact, she's not Jessica Andrade either. She's tiny.
She's built like a horse jockey.
Yes, she's built like a horse jockey.
And shout out to our other podcast, the Shillan Duffy horse racing show. Sorry, that was I got to kill a joke. That was last week. That's for the regulars here. If you're not here every week, you won't catch those references. And she's not even like the Angela Hill thing where she's short, but her legs and arms are deceptively long, and she usually doesn't give up reach. She's just short.
And against small fighters where she's able to kind of operate, within her kickboxing range against them, where she's able to make use of her skills in the clinch against them, she's done fine. She beat Jin Yu Fry. Jin Yu Fry is small. Angela Hill was too big for her. Lupi Godinez was way too strong for her. She was not able to do the Loma Lookboonmee thing against Lupi Godinez. Gomes can do that to her. I just don't know if Gomes can do that to her for 3 rounds.
Yeah.
If she had a brutal water cut to get where she is. Because her fight on the Contender Series, it was a pretty high-paced fight. Like, she didn't take much damage, which is why she was able to come back and do this. But, she certainly, put her work in. I know Loma is a 2.5 to 1 favorite here.
Yeah.
But I see Gomes just kind of being able to push her around. I think if Loma forces the clinch, Gomes is either going to be able to do damage to her there, maybe take her down if she wants to, or just shuck her off and go back to operating at range. And while I expect that Gomes is probably going to fade late, I'm thinking she's going to have 2 rounds banked away by the time she does. Give me Gomes in a pretty big upset here over Loma Lookboonmee.
Oh, wow. That is a big upset pick. Loma, as you mentioned, she's an atom weight. That's what happened. She's an atom weight fighting at strawweight. You mentioned that how decorated of a striker is. She's a multi-time Muay Thai champion. She's really fast. She's got quick hands, fast kicks. Her teep kick up the middle is her better brother. That's what you expect from a traditional Muay Thai style striker. Despite being undersized, she can win clinch battles, but I think you're onto something. It depends on who she is in the clinch, because she got beat up by Angela Hill in the clinch, but Jin Yu Fry, who also is a former atom weight champion, she had a lot of success. She was framed, and she understands how to land little small shots in the little space that she creates. She gets inside. She looks for knees. She looks for elbows. She's got even though she's out of it, she's got some good power. I like that she added some takedowns against Sam Hughes. That was something I do like. But because of her Muay Thai style, she gets taken down for a little too much for my liking. Gomes also is a kickboxer, definitely more a kickboxer, like your traditional European style kickboxer. I know she's from Brazil, but that style. She's a pressure striker, good output on the feet. She just marches down her opponents, good head movement. She pillows a little bit for me, but she also has times where she slips, which I really like. She's heavy on her front foot, which leaves her open for leg kicks, but she generates some serious power because of she can kind of spring off those back foot. She whips her overhand. She hits really hard. Got some hard calf kicks. She had a really good high kick that DC kept pointing out in her last fight on the Contender Series. Kept saying that was her best tool. The one thing I'm concerned is she was throwing out these unnecessary spinning attacks. Hopefully that's some of that. She kept throwing out a spinning wheel kick. That might have been a little bit. I'm fighting the Contender Series. I'm trying to get a contract. But she's very physically strong. You mentioned she looks like Jessica Andrade. She looks for a switch when she's going to get taken down, which I don't like. If anybody who knows how to defend a switch, all you got to do is the arm that they're posting. That's how you take them down. It's pretty simple. But when she got taken down, good get up game, and she really showed in her last fight the cardio. She was coming on stronger. I like both of these fighters. I think both fighters are pretty good. I think Loma's more technically sound. I think she's faster. I also think she might even still have the advantage in she might be a more technical, better wrestler, but I don't think she has the advantage of being stronger. You made a really good point about the weight cutting, how much that affects Gomes, but Gomes is going to be bigger. She's going to hit harder. That's why I'm with you, brother. I'm going with the upset too, man. That's why I love that you were on it. I think we get some wild exchanges, but I think Gomes is going to do the more damage. Give me Gomes by split decision.
There we go. Right out of the gate, at least as the card is currently constituted, Shillan and Duffy going with the plus 220 underdog. So that is why you tune in, and that is why we tell you, please bet responsibly. Next up, we head to the men's bantamweight division for a matchup between Tony Gravely and Javid Basharat. Gravely, the 30-year-old Virginia native, is 23-7 overall. He is 4-2 in the UFC since joining out of the third season of Dana White's Contender Series and as a former champ in both King of the Cage and CES. He is on a 2-fight win streak, those coming against Simon Oliveira back at UFC 270 in January, and most recently, Johnny Munoz Jr., whom he knocked out in just 68 seconds at UFC Fight Night Volkov versus Rosenstrike in June. He will be taking on Basharat, the undefeated 27-year-old Palestinian by way of London, is 12-0 overall. He is 1-0 in the UFC since joining out of the 5th season of Dana White's Contender Series last October. He made his UFC debut in March at UFC Fight Night Santos versus Ankalaev, where he took a unanimous decision over Trevin Jones. Odds are fairly close right now, but Basharat is a moderate favorite. He's minus 170, Gravely plus 140. Keith, you mentioned during the introduction, and I agreed with you, that this is a surprisingly strong card for a free fight night card, for a 15-fight card where there's often a lot of filler. For this fight to be second on the prelims as it is currently constituted, that's something we normally find ourselves saying about like a pay-per-view. Like, we've got an undefeated, kind of sensation, like star in the making, fighting second against a guy who's 4-2 in the UFC and looks like he might be a potential contender himself at some point. And yeah, they're fighting for next to nobody in the Apex, second fight of the night. Who have you got in this one? And do you see top 15 upside for either or both of these guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's an absolute shame, especially for Tony Gravely to be this low. I mean, I think he's done enough. And when you look at the people who's above him, like Alen Amedovski should not be higher on the card than Tony Gravely. Nikolas Motta versus Cameron VanCamp shouldn't be higher. But I wonder if this has to do with Basharat, being from Afghanistan. I wonder if it's a time thing. They're trying to put it as a decent time. I know he trains out of England too. He's got connections to a couple countries out there. I wonder if that might be a reason why it's early in the card. I'm hoping that's the reason. I hope it's not just someone just threw this together like that.
Thank you for correcting me, by the way. Yeah, he's Afghanistani by way of London, not Palestinian. But thank you. Yes. Yeah,
it shows you I was reading my notes instead of paying attention to what you said. As far as the matchup, it's a really fun fight. Yeah. I mean, Gravely has looked so good lately. He is a guy that just suddenly he has power in his hands. He explodes off his back foot to close distance and unload combinations in the pocket. He's wild. He's been clipped in the past. I mean, Nate Manis hurts him, but if he lands some of those bombs, I mean, he's starching guys. He has a D1 wrestling background, so he has some really good entries. He explodes through the hips, really good at driving to the next level. Though at times, and I've said this a lot about Gravely, he makes some mistakes when he shoots. He kind of gets sprawled out on and kind of eating hamsters, like resting underneath, like holding on to leg, which I don't like. But he gets on top. He's strong on top, smothering top pressure. He does really good to secure a position before landing shots. I mean, you go back to his early days in his career, he was accused of kind of laying and praying, like by that style, kind of really, he understands control of the position. But when he unloads, he's got some good power, good ground and pound. Because of the way he boxes, he throws so much heat and his wrestle-heavy style, he has slowed down the pass, and that's probably the one thing that's going to keep him away from the top 10 and the chin, like he's been starched a little bit. But if he can sharp those a little bit, he is a contender. Now, Basharat, he's a really good striker. He's a Muay Thai stylist who can fight at both stances. Very poised. Calculated is the really word that I see when I think of him. Good vision. He can attack from both sides. I like that he switches stance mid-combination, which is something I always talk about the highest level strikers. He's really accurate too. Good pop on his shots. Very good jab. Good at getting past his opponent's defense with his hand battling. He's really good at winning hand battles and kind of using it to open up his own shots. I love that he digs the body. His calf kicks are a really big part of his game. He throws some teep kicks up the middle. He also checks his opponent's kicks, which is something like very few people do. He can be low output sometimes, kind of keeping his opponents in the battle, which I don't like, especially against a guy like Gravely who fades late. So that's something that I think he needs to improve. He also has some improvements in the defense. He keeps his head on the center line. He keeps his chin a little high. He hangs his hands low, which is all problem. He will look for a takedown. Not an explosive through your hips guy, but more of a creative scramble and winning him kind of guy. I like that he gets takedowns from catching kicks. He's got some good control on the ground. He's a good grappler. He'll work for a better position. He can unload some good ground pound. He has 6 submission wins, and he showed in his last fight, which was a very big deal because he had all stoppage and fight. He showed in his last fight he can go 15 minutes. So Basharat's going to have to pick up the pace a little, especially against, like I said, against Gravely. That's the way you can beat Gravely is picking up the pace. A control pace. You don't want to overthrow stuff and give takedowns to Gravely. But if he can stop some takedowns and avoid some haymakers from Gravely, I think he's the more sound guy. I think he's a little bit longer. I think he can kind of jab and calf kick Gravely. I'm going to say Basharat stays undefeated and Basharat wins a decision.
Yeah, I like the breakdown there. One thing I've appreciated about Gravely's development over the last 2 or 3 fights is, I mean, as you've pointed out, he's developed like a surprising amount of power and a willingness to employ it, and he's done it without abandoning his wrestling. Like there's 2 ways that wrestlers become knockout artists, and there's the good way and the bad way. And the good way, kind of what Gravely's been doing, is keeping the threat of the takedown, allowing that to open things up for his hands. And, you know, if you can do that, then you're like the good version of Johnny Hendricks or the good, like, early version of Josh Koscheck.
Michael Chandler is a good example of someone like that who had knockout power, but he still has his wrestling.
Yes, that's a perfect example. And, you know, the bad example is someone who kind of gives up on that and they just become a right-handed fastball artist like
Yoel Romero.
Yoel Romero.
Josh
the bad
Koscheck.
version of Koscheck. The bad version of Hendricks.
Dan Henderson at times.
Yeah. Oh, dude, when was the last time Dan Henderson tried to take someone down?
Yeah.
Did he ever in the UFC? Like,
Dan
after he came back?
Henderson took down Anderson Silva in the opening round of their title fight. Easily won the first round. The second goes, I'm gonna start throwing haymakers. And then gets hurt. It was basically he got starched, dropped, and then he got subbed.
Yep, there you go. That might have been the last time he tried to take someone down in the UFC. That was it.
Yeah, somehow it was his wrestling was the issue.
Yeah. I am concerned, you know, about his tendency to shoot from too far outside, to camp out, as you pointed out, like after he gets sprawled on, because Basharat is someone who will both punish him with like punches and elbows underneath, or just spin around to the back. Basharat, he excels in scrambles that come off of him just grabbing a kick and just kind of tipping the guy over, and they go to the ground, or off of somebody's blown takedown. He's very opportunistic that way. He has a fast back take. As you pointed out, he actually has more submission wins than knockout wins. And I think half of his submissions are rear naked chokes, and they were all off of either him hurting someone and them shooting a desperation takedown, or him grabbing a kick, sort of a sloppy takedown, a scramble ensues, and he ends up on the back. Those are things I could see happening to Gravely, especially tired Gravely past about the midpoint of the second round. I'm with you here. Like, I'm leaning towards Basharat, but you know, he's not as adept defensively as a striker as he is offensively. And this could end in 2 minutes with Gravely just catching him flush and just knocking him flat, and all of a sudden the undefeated like hype train is over. But I think that's the outside chance. I think the main chance is probably that Gravely has a lot of good moments in the first round, and the second round maybe wins one of those 2, but Basharat wins going away, and maybe even starts to style on Gravely a little bit as he's tired and his shots slow down and his punches slow down and become less and less frequent. So give me Basharat by decision as well. Next up, it is the women's flyweights as Mariya Agapova and Gillian Robertson square off. Agapova, the 25-year-old Kazakhstani who goes by Demon Slayer, is 10-3 overall. She is 2-2 since joining the UFC out of Invicta and the third season of Dana White's Contender Series, where she lost to Tracy Cortez, but nonetheless is a veteran of the series. She lost her last time out, it was a second round arm triangle choke submission by Marina Moroz at UFC 272 in March. Prior to that, she choked out Sabina Masso last October at UFC Fight Night, Dern versus Rodriguez. She will try to get back in the W column against Robertson. The 27-year-old Canadian is 10-7 overall. She's 7-5 in the UFC. She lost her last time out. It was a unanimous decision loss to JJ Aldrich. Prior to that, she choked out Priscilla Cachoeira at UFC 269 last December, in spite of some of the most blatant fouls that we have seen in the UFC in years. And Keith and I are both on record as saying that Cachoeira should have been cut after that, but it is what it is. She is trying to get back in the W column as well. She is slightly favored to do so. Robertson minus 130, Agapova plus 115. Worth mentioning here that Agapova is stepping in on relatively short notice for Melissa Gatto, who was originally scheduled to face Robertson. And same as in the Loma Lookboonmee versus Denise Gomes fight that we talked about earlier tonight, Keith, the fact that Agapova is stepping in on short notice helps me make up my mind here. And here it actually does make up my mind for me instead of just kind of informing my thought process. Because to me, Mariya Agapova's standout trait is an extremely suspect gas tank. She's a fairly decent sized 125 pounder. She's a pretty good athlete. She's pretty well rounded. Like, she's a good grappler. She's a striker with some power. She's extremely young, which always promising. I think she was 21 when the UFC signed her, but
she slays demons.
She slays demons, and apparently slaying demons is tiring work because her gas tank sucks.
It's because she's up all night.
She's up. That's exactly it. She's up all night. She's sharpening some steaks. Well, no, that's vampires.
With the two boys from Supernatural, just
right.
He's the third person.
Oh,
remember Ron Waterman, the H2O man? He was like he was like a minister on Sunday and then beating people up Saturday nights. Like, that should have been his nickname, the Demon Slayer.
Oh man. I mean, she was in one of just the most ridiculous fail moments of 2020 when she took on Shayna Dobson, someone that she was like minus 1,200 against. Dobson was like 0-3 in the UFC, and she comes out like dancing and mugging for the camera, and 20 minutes later she's being taken out on a stretcher, not because she's injured, but because she is too tired to walk.
Yeah.
Like, she's the reason that Shayna Dobson got another like a year and a half in the UFC. And there's no evidence that she's really improved since then.
No.
I mean, she beat Sabina Masso, but Sabina Masso just turned out not to be UFC material. Good. And she started off looking okay against Marina Moroz and ended up getting choked out in the second round. And just the second round was complete dominance for Moroz, who is kind of borderline herself.
Yeah.
All of that against Gillian Robertson. I mean, Gillian Robertson, we've seen her ceiling. She's 27, but I think you have explicitly said, and I agree with you, that you're done waiting for Gillian Robertson to turn the corner. She just is what she is.
Yeah.
But
she's finished product.
She's a finished product. But speaking of finished, unless Agapova finishes her in the first round, I know exactly how this song ends. Like, and that's kind of what I'm expecting here. Robertson is a poor striker. Like, she's defensively porous, doesn't have much power, but on the ground, she's kind of savvy and tough, too willing to look for submissions off her back, too willing to just kind of concede position. I think part of that is that she's just not physically super strong, not a great wrestler. But I mean, Agapova will come out swinging. She'll probably take Robertson down. And the question for me is, will she like do enough damage to Robertson to finish the fight, or to at least get like a 10-8 round? Because if not, she's going to be tired. Robertson's going to be fine. And I think Robertson probably taps her in the second or third round. So yeah, give me a fight in which Agapova wins the first round. Robertson comes back to tap her out late in the second, to nobody's surprise. And they both were who we thought they were.
Yeah. Robertson is like, she's like the good looking Jordan Levitt. Jordan Levitt, like, I don't know, Jordan Levitt had red hair and was good looking in a girl, obviously.
And you know what? we're not the best judges. For all we know, Jordan Levitt is an extremely handsome man by the standards of those who judge such things. So
he's better looking
in
than me.
The comments.
Yeah, he's better looking than me. So
yeah,
he's got the twerk down better than I can. So Gillian, as you mentioned, she's not a good athlete. She's a minus athlete. She never has improved as a striking. Her boxing is low output. She throws arm strikes. She generates no powers. Kicks are just to close the distance. She's very hittable. She lacks head movement, but she's good on the ground. She has decent entries, though she'll often shoot too far away. She can be extremely desperate to get on the ground. She can catch a kick. She just dive at the legs. We talked about, I've seen a jump guard. I've seen try a flying submission. She tried a flying armbar against Talia Santos. So she isn't like a strong overall grappler, but she's pretty good on top. If she can get on top, she's a good topside grappler. She emphasizes position over submission. She doesn't rush a submission, which is probably her biggest strength. She's got some good slick back takes. She has 6 submission wins. But as you mentioned, if she's on her back, she plays BJJ way too long, takes way too much damage, doesn't show any urgency to get up, which is worrisome. Agapova is, as you mentioned, she's only 25, but like Robertson, like she needs to start improving right now, or I'm going to give up on her too. I mean, she's a southpaw that has raw tools. I say that she has pretty quick hands. She has a little kind of a brawling style. She makes a mistake. She's not very technically sound. She makes a mistake of circling to her opponent's power, which is the issue. Kicks are not a big part of her game, but she's very physically strong. She likes to get the foot to the ground, whether she just bull rushes over or catches a kick. She will shoot, but not with much setup. I wouldn't call her a wrestler. If she gets to the ground, she does look to advance position. She has heavy ground and pound, but she has weak takedown defense. She had no answer from Marna Morose's ground game. I mean, she was tossing it up submission, but wasn't even coming close to getting the submissions. And you talk about her cardio, and yes, her cardio is a huge, massive thing. But some of it, I think she might be a front runner. And what I mean by that is she's one of these persons that she's way better than her opponent, where she can kind of just blitz her opponent and get nothing coming back. She'll look really good. But if her opponent has a little grit in them, they can battle, they can kind of take some and come back. I think it's cardio, but I also think it's a little bit of a mental thing with her, where she seems to fold. And I hate saying something like that. I really do hate saying like I want that to be wrong because it sounds so bad. But as far as predictions go, I really think this is a perfect fight for Robertson. If she can't beat Agapova, she needs to be cut. In this case, I think she just gets the fight to the ground. I expect her to get some takedowns. I think she catches Agapova in a submission. I actually think she gets a first-round submission. So Robertson, my first-round sub.
2 picks for Gillian Robertson to right the ship a little bit after losing 3 of her last 4 fights. Man, so I'm looking at Robertson's record, and her last fight, was against J.J. Aldrich, so, not quite, but her other four UFC losses, Miranda Maverick, Tyler Santos, Macy Barber, and Mayra Bueno Silva. Those are just 4 physical hosses.
Yeah.
That's rough. And Mariya Agapova can do that, but you can't do that for more than about 4 minutes. So no. I think that's why we feel the way we do about this fight. Next up, we have a middleweight matchup between Joseph Pyfer and Alen Amedovski. Pyfer, the 25-year-old Pennsylvania native, is 9-2 overall. This will be his UFC debut after 2 appearances on Dana White's Contender Series. He was on the 2020 season where he was injured late in the first round against Dustin Stoltzfus. He went back and won a fight in CFFC, came back in July in the first episode of this season of Dana White's Contender Series, where he knocked out Osman Diaz in the second round. If you watch the Contender Series, you will remember that episode because Pyfer was the only one signed, and very notably because Dana White just went off on the entire cast of people, just dropped the mic basically and walked off and left Laura Sanko to go, so I guess Pyfer got signed and nobody else did? And here we are. He is taking on Amedovski, the 34-year-old Macedonian who has lived in Italy for most of his adult life, is 8-3 overall. He is 0-3 in the UFC. He has he debuted back in 2019, dropped back-to-back fights to Krzysztof Jotko and John Phillips, came back from a couple injury-laden and COVID-sidelined years in May and got choked out by Joseph Holmes in the first round at UFC Fight Night, Holmes versus Vieira. So most likely the back is against the wall for Amedovski, and he is not favored to save his job here. He is plus 320 right now, Pyfer minus 400. And Keith, I understand why the odds are what they are, because I'm fairly high on Pyfer as a prospect. He's not perfect. Okay. I mean, there's a reason he's not undefeated on the way here. You know, he's not a finished product, but he has a ton of upside. He's young. He has enormous physical tools. He's in good hands training wise. He looked great on the Contender Series. He was just so, he was strong. He was fast. He was physically superior to Diaz. But these odds are mostly just that Amedovski is not UFC material.
Amedovski sucks.
He's a short, squat middleweight, which that's fine. You can be a short, squat middleweight if you have surprising athleticism like a Kelvin Gastelum does, or you have elite athleticism like Robert Whittaker does, but he doesn't. I mean, he's just a 5'10" muscular dude that doesn't really have any skills at a UFC level. I mean, when you have a 17-second knockout at the hands of John Phillips, one of the worst guys to pass through the division in the last 5 years, then you disappear for a couple of years, you come back and you get choked out in 64 seconds by Joseph Holmes, who isn't the blue chip of blue chip prospects. I mean, Amedovski on paper.
Man, you're so much nicer than I am. Like, you're so professional. This is why you work full time for Shillan. Because I'm like, he sucks, and you're like, you're saying everything I'm saying, but as nice as you possibly can.
Well, I got to fill out the time. This can't be a 55-minute show. I mean, there's 15 fights. Maybe I should cut it short, but you can make a very good case that he's the worst middleweight in the UFC. And Pyfer, I don't know where his upside is. I think on the top end, he could still improve a ton and be a contender. At worst, he's a guy that's going to stick around for a while because there are Amedovskis to be kind of cleared out. But I understand why he's a minus 400 favorite over Amedovski. I expect that this might look something like the Osman Diaz fight, where he's faster. He's got longer reach. Like Amedovski, again, he has none of the physical tools that allow a short, compact fighter to excel at a UFC level. He can't get in range against taller guys. He can't get takedowns against UFC level athletes. So I expect Pyfer's probably just going to knock him out in the first round. If I had to guess, Amedovski wades in with some of his patented sloppy hooks, is probably going to be looking for a chance to get this fight to the ground if he can, expecting that he'll have better survivability there. And Pyfer just either intercepts a takedown attempt with a knee or pancakes one, spins around to the back and pounds him out on the ground. But give me Pyfer by first round TKO.
Wow. Yeah. Amedovski, I mean, he's looked terrible in 3 years. Like you mentioned, he got knocked out by John Phillips, submitted by Joseph Holmes. I mean, is there a worse run in 3 years than losing to those two guys?
No, that's...
You mentioned he has high output, like when he actually doesn't get knocked out in seconds. When he actually gets to fight, he has high output. He marches down his foes. He throws wild haymakers. He loads up on everything, throws from his hips. He's a weak defensive wrestler. He really struggles on bottom. I've had to go back like 3 or 4 fights to find some kind of offense from him. Against Krzysztof Jotko, he had moments. We had some pretty strong ground and pound when Jotko somehow found himself on bottom briefly with Amedovski. That was
Isn't it ironic
4 years ago.
That the one guy he did decently against is the best fighter of the bunch?
Well, you're throwing the decent out there. Like, he didn't get beat in 16 seconds. But yes, that is ironic of the group. Pyfer, he's a lot of things you like about this guy. Stiff jab, good power. He really whips his shots. 6 KOs. I mean, his last fight, beautiful walk-off, perfectly timed. It was his left hook, which is, they talked about in the broadcast being his best punch. I think it was Ozzy Diaz. He just starched it with that. He does make the mistake of throwing too many power shots. I wish he'd kind of almost throw 70% power and then unload with bigger shots when the openings are there. He slows down a little bit and doesn't like to be precious, so that's some things I don't like. But he's got some hard calf kicks. He's a good wrestler. He's very physically strong. He grab a leg, just pick you up, slam you. Slick back takes. He did on the contender series. He did ride a little high for my liking and lost position, so he's got to clean that up. But he has 2 submission wins, and he almost had an arm triangle choke on that in that fight. So Pyfer has the pressure of trying to keep the Daniel Gracie, Renzo Gracie, Philly, that whole team. They're undefeated in the UFC. It's an incredible streak. I forget what it is. It's something like 20-0 or something at this point. He has a streak of holding that the pressure. I think he keeps it going. I'm with you. I think Pyfer catches him early. I think he starches him. Give me Pyfer by first round TKO.
Next up is another middleweight matchup, this one featuring Anthony Hernandez versus Marc-Andre Barriault. Hernandez, the 28-year-old Californian, is 9-2 with 1 no contest. Overall, he is 3-2 since joining the UFC out of the second season of Dana White's Contender Series, where he had a knockout of previously undefeated Jordan Wright that was later reversed to a no contest when he tested positive for cannabis. But since then, as I said, 3-2. He has won 2 in a row. Most recently, he took a unanimous decision over Josh Fremd at UFC 273 in April. Prior to that, it was last February at UFC 258 where he managed the shocking upset, tapping out Rodolfo Vieira in the second round at UFC 258. In between, he missed most of 2021 with a variety of hand injuries, so it is, it's a second fight back from a pretty long layoff. He'll be facing Barriault. The 32-year-old Canadian is 14-5 with 1 no contest overall. He is 3-4 with 1 no contest in the UFC since joining as a previous 2-division champ in TKO. That 3-4, somewhat deceptive. He lost his first 3 fights in the UFC right out of the gates. Could easily have lost his job, but after a no contest versus Oscar Piechota, he is 3-1 in his last 4. He defeated Jordan Wright himself back in April at UFC Fight Night, Lemos versus Andrade, tapped him out midway through the first round. Prior to that, he was the victim of Chidi Njokuani's UFC debut. We'll be talking about Njokuani a little later, but he's going to try to make it 2 in a row here. He is the slight underdog in his endeavors to do so. Right now, Hernandez is minus 170, Barriault around plus 145. Keith, when I first scanned this card, a couple weeks ago, just kind of looking at the lineup, I kind of went, Hernandez versus Barriault, it's just another fight. But for just another fight, it's not that bad. I just kind of found myself surprised. Whoa, yeah, but it should be a banger. Hernandez is above 500 in the UFC. Barriault is, again, he's won 3 out of 4 over not bad opposition. This is surprisingly relevant. I dismissed this fight too quickly, I think. How do you see this one going? Who do you see winning?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said. Hernandez is a minus athlete, but he makes up for it for just being super aggressive. He marched down his opponents, and he can crack. For a guy who's like a smaller middleweight, he's got some power. I'd say he's an okay wrestler, but I think he's a very underrated grappler. I mean, we talk about it. Obviously, his submission of Rodolfo Vieira is legendary. Yeah, Vieira was tired, but you still have to have the skills. It's somewhat of a high-level skills to get a submission like that against even a tired Vieira.
How did he get tired? He got tired because he had Hernandez on the ground the entire first round and couldn't do anything to him.
Yeah, exactly. And Hernandez made him work, and yeah, he finally submitted him.
Yeah.
It wasn't the first submission attempt where he just got lucky. He had Vieira in a couple submissions up until that point. He loves his front headlock series, the guillotines, the anacondas. He's a weak defensive wrestler, but as you just mentioned, he works back to his feet. I mean, he showed incredible submission defense against Vieira, showed how hard he is to submit. And he uses cardio as a weapon. That wasn't just, Vieira got tired and I was working. That's what he does in all his fights. He works and works and works. He's on the gas pedal, and he's a builder. Barriault, he's a high volume striker for a guy who's bricked up. The guy's a ripped up guy. He doesn't fight like you think. He's a high volume fighter who he marches down his opponents. He's a bit of a headhunter. His best punch is his right hand. That's his best blow. But he constantly looks for it. He looks for it a little too much for my liking. He makes himself predictable. He has good KO power when he lands, though. Hard calf kicks. He doesn't like being pressured, though. He wants to be the guy moving forward. I go back to the Jung Young Park. It's been a while, but Jung Young Park beat him by just pressuring him. Like his pressure got to Barriault. He has some defensive holes. He pillars, which I don't like. He will shoot for a takedown, but he isn't a wrestler. He did show against Christoph Yako some good takedown defense, and he also has good cardio. That's what I meant by a guy who, like, for a bricked up guy, you don't expect him to have good cardio. He has pretty good cardio. I think this is a war. I think we have a war on hands. I think both guys will look to move forward. They'll look to throw down. I think both guys have some underrated wrestling. I'm taking Hernandez, though. He's a little bit younger. He has a little bit less damage. And honestly, he falls into that overachiever category, like that group, like the Gerald Murray shots, the group that like the guys that we just like that you just look at them and they're like, man, he's got so much heart. So I learned from going against Gerald Murray. I'm not going against Hernandez, so give me Hernandez by decision in an absolute war.
I'm with you here pretty much from A to Z. Hernandez, physically, he looks like a guy who could cut to 170, but I think it would be the worst possible thing for him to ever try to do, because it's not like he would suddenly become a lights out knockout artist against welterweights, and the cardio and the pace that have carried him to victory against more skilled and more talented 185ers might disappear. So, yeah, like he does seem like an overachiever, and that's not meant as a backhanded compliment at all. Like, that's fantastic. Some of the greatest fighters of all time are overachievers. Like, when was Randy Couture ever like the more athletic or bigger? Yeah. And the thing is, Barriault has like a certain amount of that as well. Like, this is a guy whose back was absolutely against the wall 2 or 3 years ago, and I fully expected to be out of the UFC. Like, I fully expected he was going to wash out and just be kind of a low-key major bust for a guy that, again, came over as a 2-division champ from TKO. And yeah, he just won the light heavyweight belt once in a one-off fight, before he left, but he had been their middleweight champ and had beaten some good people, and then just kind of turned into nothing. But no, he's turned into something, and he's become a better fighter, like kind of on the job at the UFC level. But here, I think this is a rough match up for him, because he is a guy that also has become someone who comes on stronger as the fight goes along. He's become a little bit of a builder himself, but I think Hernandez is more of one. And as you pointed out, Hernandez is younger. He's at the age where he's still probably making substantive improvements from fight to fight. So give me Hernandez by decision in an all-out war, but this is one of the harder fights on the card for me to call. Next up, the featherweights take the cage, as it is a matchup between Damon Jackson and Pat Sabatini. Jackson, the 34-year-old Texan, is 21-4-1 with 1 no contest overall. He is 4-2-1 with 1 no contest in the UFC, but it's worth noting that he had a run in the UFC quite a long time ago, left, became, arguably LFA's top fighter for a couple of years. He is 4-1 since rejoining the UFC. He came back to the UFC in September of 2020, so almost exactly 2 years ago. Since then, he has beaten Mirsad Bektic, lost to Ilia Topuria, then beaten Charles Rosa, Kamwela Kirk, and Dan Argueta. Most recent of those, the Argueta fight was at UFC Fight Night, Volkov versus Rosenstrike in June. He will try to make it 4 in a row against Sabatini. The 31-year-old Pennsylvanian is 17-3 overall. He is a perfect 4-0 in the UFC since joining as an outgoing CFFC champion. He fought most recently in April at UFC Fight Night Luque versus Muhammad 2, where he took a unanimous decision over TJ Laramie. So he'll be looking to make it 5 in a row in the UFC. Jackson will be looking to make it 4 in a row. Sabatini is a substantial favorite here. He is minus 225. Jackson plus 175 as the underdog. Keith, I'm going to throw this to you first for sure, but I see this almost as a mirror match. These guys have so many things in common. Like, they're a little more exaggerated in some cases. Like, neither of these guys, I think, is a super standout athlete, but Jackson is definitely, like, Jackson's a minus athlete by UFC standards. Both of them outstanding, opportunistic grapplers with, sneaky good wrestling.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of get why Sabatini's more than the 2-1 favorite, and then I kind of don't get it. Part of it may just be the win streak, the Renzo Gracie Philly thing where nobody wants to be the first one, to pick one of those guys from that gym to lose, and Jackson is just kind of like, yeah, but Jackson's just kind of this, balding 34-year-old guy who just seems to always find a way to win, even though he's not the better athlete.
He's 34, but he looks like he's 54.
Yeah. The hairline is struggle for sure.
He's got that Matt Lindland look there.
Hey, I mean, yeah. It has a few things in common with Matt Lindland. I mean, I don't know his political leanings, but the hairline is definitely in common. The apparent athleticism, definitely in common.
Yeah, just looking at David Jackson, he just looks like a Republican. I'm sorry. It's just like.
He's a Fortis guy, so he at least trains in Fort Worth.
Yeah, there you go. Dude, honestly, is there more Fort Worth guy than that guy? Like, he looks like he should be.
Yeah, he looks pretty Fort Worth. But
Fort Worth is awesome, by the way.
That's a great town. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. It was my favorite place in Texas. I've only been to Dallas and Fort Worth, but whatever.
Hey. Who you got in this one, and how?
So as much as we joke about Jackson, like, he kind of similar to what we just talked about Hernandez. He's kind of the guy that I really just like. He's your overachieving guy who just nothing jumps off to a page, and next thing you know, he wins. He beats guys he should have beat. Like, those are the guys I like. I like the guys that you're like, man, I hate picking. I don't want to pick him because he should lose, but then they win. So he's a long and lengthy fighter who can keep his distance by throwing really long, rangy shots. He's got high volume. He throws hard kicks. Though he'll often throw naked leg kicks to leave him open to counters and keep his chin high in the air. And there's nothing in his boxing that you're like, oh, that looks good. But he's a good D1 wrestler. He's got good timing on his reactionary double. I mean, he took down Charles Rosa 6 times in the fight. He was taken down by Marcel Bektic 7 times, and he made it worse by jumping guillotine. He's not a good defensive wrestler, but he's got a good guillotine. He's got some really good underrated grappling. He's got some slick submissions, some slick back takes. He likes to kind of backpack fighters. He can get a submission, and the biggest reason that stands out to me is that cardio. He's got the cardio. The reason why he caught Bektic on 3 days' notice in the third round is because he kept working, making him work, and overachieving. Now, as you mentioned, 17, another Renzo Gracie, Daniel Gracie, Philly guy. I think he's a little bit better athlete than you say. I'd say he's a pretty solid athlete. He has that karate style on the feet where he has that wide base. Nothing special with the hands, so it's kind of similar to Jackson, kind of just average. I like that he's intelligent, though. He works the body. He's got a little bit of pop in his hands, but he has that karate style that he'll toss out some spinning attacks. He's a really good wrestler, though. Good entries. He gets on top, smothering top control, hard ground and pound. He has a submission threat. We talked about that slick heel hook he got on Jamal Emmers. I hate to do this, but I'm going to go against Damon Jackson. While I think he's a good grappler, I don't think Sabatini submits him. I just think he's going to. I think it's going to look a lot like the Bektic fight, where Sabatini's getting takedowns, Jackson's jumping for guillotines when he shouldn't be jumping for. Sabatini's kind of just not taking any chances, kind of working on top. But unlike Bektic, I don't think Sabatini fades. Give me Sabatini, and I'm backing Daniel Gracie team once again. I'm gonna say they finished tonight undefeated still. Sabatini by decision.
Yeah, I'm with you here. It pains me to pick against a guy who stylistically he's one of our guys. He is definitely from that Darren Elkins mold. That, yeah, I mean, I don't think most fighters would want me to, most guys would want me to call him this, but to call him like a male Roxanne Modafferi is not an insult. but yeah, like, he's unbelievably tough. Yeah, Ilia Topuria ran him over, but Ilia Topuria has been running just about everybody over and is going to continue to do so until he's fighting top 5 fighters.
Yeah.
And so Jackson's going to be there the whole time, but his opportunistic and sometimes high risk submission game, I don't think is going to work on Sabatini. So I'm with you there. Like, even if he's the fresher guy in the 3rd round, I think he's going to be down 2 rounds to 1, and Sabatini's just not going to blunder into a guillotine or be so tired that he just gives up his back and can't do anything as, you know, Jackson locks up a body triangle and starts to choke him. Like that, that's not going to happen to Sabatini. And because of that, I have Sabatini by decision in what should be a fight that's closer than the odds look on paper, but where the outcome of the fight actually isn't very much in doubt. So, yeah, I'm with you in Tenzo Gracie Philly, Daniel Gracie team staying undefeated on the night. But, yeah, like, Jackson's still standing at the end. Give me Sabatini by decision. Next up is a welterweight matchup between Trevin Giles and Louis Cosce. Giles, the 30-year-old Houston native, is 14-4 overall. He is 5-4 in the UFC. He's 0-1 since dropping from middleweight to welterweight, so he is on a 2-fight losing streak. Those coming against Dricus du Plessis last July. Then he dropped to 170 pounds, came back in January at UFC 270, and got knocked out late in the 1st round by Michael Morales. He will try to avoid making it 3 in a row against Cosce. The 27-year-old from Northern California is 7-1 overall. That's the good news. The bad news is that the one in that record was his last fight, where he faded badly against Sasha Palatnikov and got punched out in the 3rd round. The other bad news is that that was almost 2 full years ago, and this is his first fight back. He was out for a good amount of time, had a fight even this past April, canceled when he tested positive for COVID. He's finally back, though, and he is not favored here. He is plus 170, Giles minus 200. I get why Giles is the favorite here. But even having said that, Giles always makes me nervous. And, I mean, this isn't like, I mean, I've made my bias and my shameless homer tendencies a known thing while trying to tell you who I think will actually win fights. But this isn't just me saying, you know, yay, Fortis guys, you know, I think Fortis is a cool team. I mean, you know, Trevin Giles is in my town. I consider, you know, his head coach, Jeremy Mahan of War Training Center, formerly of 4 Ounce Fight Club, like, I consider him a pretty good friend. Having said that, Trevin Giles' problem, no pun intended, I guess that is his nickname, it's a known thing. He is prone to just collapse and have a major lapse in fight IQ or a major blunder in any fight. I mean, he's 5-4 in the UFC, and in all 4 of his losses, he was winning at some point. I mean, the Morales fight was really fast. You know, it was a 4-minute thing. It was a wild brawl, and Morales knocked him out. But Dricus du Plessis, he won the 1st round. Gerald Meerschaert, he probably won both the first 2 rounds. Zach Cummings, he won at least one of the first 2 rounds. In every fight, he's winning until he loses, and it's not even a predictable thing like, well, he just gets tired and then his opponent runs him over. He doesn't really get tired. He just makes an enormous mistake at some point in all of his fights. And most of the question just comes down to whether his opponent is good enough or aware enough to take advantage of it. Because otherwise, on paper, he should be one of the best guys in the division. At 185, he wasn't undersized, and he's a good athlete. At 170, he's huge. And if nothing else, in the Morales fight, he proved that, you know, he can make 170. He looked fine. He didn't seem drained. I mean, maybe it affected his chin. Maybe that's why Morales was able to knock him out. But it wasn't like, he didn't look like death on the scale. So physically, he looks like he can make 170. And he's a fighter with all the tools. He's a good boxer. He has power. And he, you know, and except for that 1 or 2 times a fight, he's usually pretty defensively sound. He's a good wrestler. He doesn't use it very often, but he's a good wrestler. He's surprisingly capable of taking care of himself on the ground. He's a well-rounded, athletic fighter, like plus athlete fighter who, again, you can argue that he should have won every fight he's been in the UFC, and instead he's barely over 500. And that's a thing that at 30, I don't know if it gets fixed. It can be, like, because that would have been most of my scouting report on Charles Oliveira 5 years ago. Or, Fabricio Verdum 10 years ago. But I understand why Giles is the favorite, and he's fortunate here in that there are even more question marks about Cosce. But if I were a betting man, I'd steer clear of this one, just because that moment's going to come. Cosce, he was kind of exposed. I mean, he fought his way into the UFC through the Contender Series back in 2020, and all of his fights had been first-round knockouts. Or I think there'd been a couple submissions, but they'd all been steamrollings. Like, they'd all been in the first round, and a lot of them have been 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 8 seconds. On the Contender
Series.
His brother the same way. Yeah, his brother was the same way, and they both had that merging into traffic problem when they hit the UFC. I mean, he was such a better athlete than Sasha Palatnikov. I mean, it looked like... Yeah, anyway. Cosce, like physically, he is a plus athlete. And he's not quite as squat and bricked up as his brother Orion Cosce, but he is a big welterweight. Yeah. But yeah, he ran out of gas, he ran out of ideas, and Palatnikov came back and knocked him out in the third round, even though Cosce is probably more skilled almost everywhere and is definitely a better athlete. The question is just whether those things have been fixed in the last almost 2 years. Because age 25 to 27, that's certainly a period where a fighter can make strides, but considering he's had health problems in the interim, and considering that his main problems weren't his skill set, but just, again, his cardio, maybe like some front runner tendencies, we don't know. So there are even more questions hanging over him in this fight than there are over Giles, which is saying a lot. But I'm just not betting on Cosce's kind of cardiovascular and mental makeup having changed with these 2 years off. So I do favor Giles here, and I favor Giles probably to get a stoppage in the second or third round. I think he is a niftier striker with better reach than Cosce. So unless Cosce is able to just bull him over for takedowns early and often, I think Giles is going to kind of carve him up on the feet. Biggest risk to Giles is going to be running into a Cosce haymaker. Again, he's a defensively sound boxer, except when. But I'm not counting on Cosce being one of the people that's going to be able to take advantage of the Trevin Giles moment. So give me Giles by second round TKO. It's going to be, a rough back to the drawing board moment for Cosce, but Giles's decision to drop from 185 to 170 will be vindicated, at least for the time being.
Yeah, you mentioned Lewis not as bricked up as Orion. I picture them going to the gym together, and Lewis is he's doing pull-ups, and then he takes a break and Orion jumps in. He's doing pull-ups. And Orion's doing the pull-ups with the weights hanging off of him, like one of those guys. So how about we do this? Anybody who's ever watched these shows know who I'm taking. So how about we save some time? Listen, Trevor Giles is a police officer. So am I. I refuse to pick against a police officer. So give me Giles by decision.
Keep in mind the Houston police officer whose coach is my friend, pretty much the official fighter of the Duffy show.
There you go. Save some time. Hit by decision.
Next up, we have a lightweight matchup between Nikolas Motta and Cameron VanCamp. This is a fight that was originally set for a year ago, and it probably would have been better for these two guys if the fight had happened then, because at least one of them would have gotten a win. What happened was it was set for September of 2021. VanCamp got injured, so Motta went and fought Jim Miller, got conked. VanCamp, once he recovered, fought Andre Fialho at 170, got conked. So obviously the best possible thing to do is make the fight that originally should have been made, and here they are going to meet. Motta, the 29-year-old Brazilian, is 12-4 overall. He is, as I mentioned, 0-1 in the UFC since joining as a former CFFC champ and a veteran of the 4th season of Dana White's Contender Series. VanCamp, 29-year-old from Indiana, is 15-6-1 with 1 no contest. He also, of course, is 0-1 in the UFC. All those things are equal. The odds are not. Motta minus 235. VanCamp plus 200 as the substantial underdog. Yeah, Keith is making a face.
I just should have taken him.
And
Motta just got, what'd you say? What was the word you said? Conked?
He got conked.
He got conked by Jim Miller?
He got conked by Jim Miller. At least VanCamp got conked by Andre Fialho, who's a weight class bigger and hits like a truck. Like, it's never good to be like Jim Miller's like first clean knockout of his career.
Wow. Yeah. When Jim Miller's like 87 years old.
Yeah, it's a young 87.
Yeah.
He quit smoking a few years ago. It's like,
yeah.
Man, who you got in this one? I mean, I can already hear you saying that nobody in the UFC should be a 2-1 underdog to Nikolas Motta. But
no, I mean, Motta's he came from a good regional scene, which I definitely like. He's a good striker. He works behind a high guard. He's very bob and weave style. Stiff jab. He hits hard. He can be a little trigger shy at times, which I don't like. But he rips the body, hard kicks, nice high kick, strong Muay Thai clinch. He works the body with some hard knees inside the clinch. He's a weak offensive wrestler, and he's also a weak defensive wrestler. He doesn't have a submission on his record. He does have a good get-up game, but I don't trust his chin. He's been knocked out a bunch of times. He's been knocked out 3 times in his career, including his last fight against Jim Miller. Now, VanCamp, he's a big welterweight. I mean, he's massive. He switches stance a lot, can fight out of both sides.
And worth mentioning, he's a big welterweight, and he's fighting at lightweight here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's what I was saying. He was big over Fialho, and now he's fighting a smaller guy. He switches stances a lot. He uses movement well. He uses a lot of feints to draw out attacks. He can crack too. I mean, he got conked by Fialho, but do you remember why? He just conked Fialho right before that. Like, Fialho was hurt. He was going in for the kill, and Fialho caught him. It was like a cut from behind by Fialho. So he's got some nice calf kicks. He's got a good teep kick. He hangs his hands low, which is really worse, and he keeps his chin really high in there, which is where he's a huge target to get cracked. And Motta's a guy who can crack a little bit. He's not a wrestler, but he is a good grappler. He's got 9 submissions on his record. But as you mentioned, I'm worried about his chin. The extra weight cut is worrisome. You mentioned Fialho. I mean, he caught him because he was too aggressive and left an opening. So I liked Motta a lot heading into his last fight, but he looked terrible. He can still crack, though, and VanCamp has some serious defensive issues. But VanCamp is much bigger. He'll have a 5-inch. He's 5 inches tall. I don't know what the reach is, but I'm assuming probably around that same. He has the power. He probably has, I don't know if he has power advantage, but he has some power in his hands too. But he should have a big advantage when he gets to the ground. I'm going to go with another massive upset. I'm going to go with VanCamp. I'm going to say he gets a submission in the second round.
Oh, man. Once again, we are both going for a greater than 2-1 underdog pulling off the upset. That's twice on this card. And again, for anyone who is a recent arrival to the Shillan and Duffy show, we do not compare notes at all before we talk. Like, we get on the stream, we talk for about 5 minutes to make sure that we both have the most up-to-date lineup of fights.
We don't like each other.
Yeah, like, we don't.
Like, Ben's a dick. Like, he comes off like a really fun, nice guy. Ben's a dick.
That's what's going to play over our intro. Like,
that's it. Yeah, when we get John to do the intro, it's just me saying Ben's a dick. Yeah. Well, it's just saying, Keith Shillan, that'd be some little thing, and Ben Duffy, Ben's a dick.
I mean, anybody who's listened to like that uncut episode we did where we just left the stream rolling in between knows that that's not true. But yeah, like, we don't talk about the cards at all, so it's always kind of. When I'm gonna pick an upset, I always wonder, is Keith gonna be on board for this one? So I was happy that you were on for the Gomes one. And this one, it's a lot the same dynamic. I think it should be about a pick'em. And my main concern with the underdog fighter is making weight. Because VanCamp was a welterweight for his whole career up until about 3 fights ago. He dropped to 155. then bounced right back up to 170 for his UFC debut because it was, the short notice thing against Fialho. And here he's going to be going back down to 155. Is he going to be able to make it and be in, be in good condition to perform? If he is, I do think he's a sneaky, upset tip here, just because Motta looked terrible against Miller, because VanCamp, even in his fights at 155 pounds, he looked good. None of them went that long that we could see his gas tank, but I don't think we necessarily get there. I think both these guys are going to land on each other on the feet. Neither of them is defensively all that sound. But this thing's going to end up on the ground sometime in the first 2 rounds. And I think VanCamp has a substantial advantage there. He's much bigger and stronger. And he, again, definitely of the opportunistic grappler variety rather than the lockdown conventional grappler. But, lots of his stuff works off the front headlock. And I can see him getting something like that on Motta and just maybe, guillotining him, Bravo choke. I mean, he has one of those 10-finger ninja choke things on his record. Give me VanCamp by second round submission. Next up is another lightweight matchup as Trey Ogden welcomes Daniel Zellhuber to the UFC. Ogden, the 32-year-old Glory MMA and fitness product, is 15-5 overall. He is 0-1 in the UFC. He debuted back in April, losing by a split decision to Jordan Levitt. That was at UFC on ESPN, Luque versus Muhammad 2. He will try to get his first octagon win against Zellhuber. The 23-year-old Mexican is a perfect 12-0 in his professional career. He comes to the UFC through the 5th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He appeared last September where he took a unanimous decision over Lucas Almeida. He is a substantial favorite here. He's minus 225, Ogden plus 190 on the comeback. Keith, it's a young prospect against a grizzled veteran. The grizzled veteran is a Glory MMA guy. He's also a big underdog. Who you got in this one?
Yeah, another one that I think the odds are way off. We're taping this a little early, so maybe these odds will change if people will be like, what the hell are you guys talking about? I'll say this about Ogden. The last fight he lost against Jordan Levitt, I scored it for him. I thought he won. It was really close. It wasn't a rob or anything, but he's big for the weight class. That's really thing going for him. But it's really troublesome because he throws a lot of single strikes. He looks for his right hand a little too much. I like that he does attack the body. He throws a lot of kicks, but he doesn't check leg kicks. Jordan Levitt kicked him in the legs 200 times. Jordan Levitt beat him with weak kicks, calf kicks. They weren't blasting calf kicks, just volumed him with kicks. He again will look for takedowns, but not much setup. He kind of overextends on his entries, but he has good takedown defense. But when he was taken down, he really struggled to get off the bottom against Jordan Levitt. He did show that he has good submission defense, and he has 11 submission wins on his own record. And honestly, he caught Levitt in the guillotine in that fight, and Levitt was probably saved by the bell. It was a deep guillotine, but he gassed late against Jordan Levitt, which is a little troublesome. Zellhuber, I'm sorry if I'm saying his name wrong. He's only 23, so I love that. He's long and lengthy. He wants to work from distance. He uses feints to draw out attacks really well. Quick hands, nice snap on his shots. I like that he goes down to the body. He doesn't like being pressured, though, and he avoids shots with shoulder rolls, which works effective to kind of deflect shots, but it never looks good to the judges because it kind of looks like it's landing a little bit, which is not. Think of what Bobby Green does and Jorge Masvidal did a little bit. It just never really looks that good. He brawls a little too much for my liking for a guy that has length on people that he should work for distance. And he was hurt on the Contender Series in a fight that he won fairly easily. He has a lot of kicks in his arsenal, hard calf kicks, but he throws a lot of them naked. He's open to be countered. Great high kick, though. He gets up really good. He landed a beautiful question mark kick on the Contender Series matchup. Strong Muay Thai clinch, knees in the clinch. He had a great throw in the Contender Series matchup. Good ground and pound. He has 2 submission wins, which is good to have. So he's a little bit of a submission threat. And he uses cardio as a weapon. He was getting stronger and stronger in the fights that I've seen. I think this is a tough one because this is a pretty good step up in competition for Zellhuber. Ogden has some raw skills on the feet, plus he's a submission threat. But give me the 23-year-old. He's at the age where he should be making big jumps of improvement at this age. He showed that he has a really great gas tank. I expect him to come on strong late. Give me Zellhuber by decision.
Yeah, you and I have already come down on the side of 2-1 or greater underdogs, but this is one where I don't see it. One, I'm going to adapt one of the maxims that you have lived by for as long as we've been doing this show together, and I'm just going to say I'm going to have a hard time ever picking someone who got outstruck by Jordan Levitt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he did. And if Jordan Levitt was able to kind of stymie him and win rounds against him with his striking, I think Zellhuber is going to be capable of lighting him up because he's not longer. Like, they're both super, like, lanky guys, but he's more technically sound. He definitely hits harder. And I'm glad you pointed out that toss on the Contender Series because that was my most memorable moment of the whole fight. That's the one where as soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh, I remember this fight. Just because, it seemed so effortless and it was such a perfect reaction to the position they were in. I thought it was good awareness from such a young fighter. And then the clincher for me is that, if I'm going to pick a big upset, it either needs to be somebody that has a stunning finish potential, which isn't necessarily Ogden, or somebody that I definitely think is going to be the fresher fighter late and might ruin someone's day that way. But that isn't Ogden either. So I've got Zellhuber by decision here as well. And I think how he wins will determine how hard the hype machine is cranking, like, once this thing is over. Next up is a featherweight matchup between Andre Fili and Bill Algeo. Fili, the 32-year-old Californian, is 21-9 with 1 no contest overall. He's 9-8 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He is on a 3-fight winless streak, those being a unanimous decision loss to Bryce Mitchell last October, a no contest against Daniel Pineda last June, and a fast knockout loss to Joanderson Brito at UFC on ESPN Font versus Vera this past April. Some of that misfortune of his own making. He was winning the Pineda fight handily before he landed a really, really damaging inadvertent eye poke that stopped things and probably robbed him of a win. But he is going to try to get a clean win here against Algeo, who steps in on short notice for Lando Venata. The word is that Venata was injured, but I think he secretly just arrived in Vegas a week early, hoping he could get a rematch with Tony Ferguson. Algeo, the 33-year-old Philadelphia native, is 16-6 overall. He is 3-2 since joining the UFC as a veteran of Dana White's Contender Series. He appeared on the 3rd season. He lost via decision to the British kid, Brendan Loughnane, the one that Dana said wasn't a killer, and so he's going to go make $1 million in PFL next month. Anyway, Algeo is on a 2-fight winning streak, those being a unanimous decision over the same Brito that knocked out Fili, and Herbert Burns, who he won via retirement, and then Herbert Burns had an actual retirement right afterwards, and that was at UFC on ABC, Ortega versus Rodriguez back in July. Fili is the slight favorite here. He's minus 140. Algeo plus 110 as the slight underdog. Keith? What?
I was thinking about Herbert Burns retiring. Like, this is exactly how you always picture it. My last fight, get carried out of the cage by my brother's arms.
But not getting carried out on his shoulders because I won, but getting carried out like a bride being carried across the threshold. Oh. It was sad. It was rough, dude. I feel bad for laughing at it because it's just such a bummer.
look like Marines carrying kids running out of Saigon.
Hey, that was me once upon a time. Yeah. All right. I don't really get the line here. I mean, it's not insanely out of whack, but like Fili has been on a rough run. Like, he got starched by Brito, that, by the way, Algeo beat recently. He looked he looked pretty good against Mitchell, all things considered. Like, that's about as tough a fight as anyone has given Bryce Mitchell in the UFC. He clearly understood what he needed to do, and he tried to use his defensive wrestling to kind of stay out of the terrifying ground game of Mitchell. But the Mitchell fight is what makes me think he could probably like beat Algeo, because I think he's a harder hitter than Algeo on the feet, and I think he can probably keep it standing if he wants to. Just, I still don't trust Andre Fili to make the right decisions throughout the entire course of a fight. And it's not quite like the Trevin Giles thing, where he comes in with the right game plan and then there's just one enormous brain cramp at some point, and he finds himself in a guillotine, or just comes in with his hands down and just gets clocked. Fili just seems to come in with like weird ideas about what he needs to win a fight sometimes. I think Algeo just kind of wins a back and forth scrap. I think a lot of it will take place on the feet, but if Algeo wants to go to the ground, I think Fili will go there willingly. And I think Algeo's a better grappler and is at least going to be able to get to positions where he can do some damage, can like maybe even threaten with submissions and win rounds that way. So give me Algeo by decision in a slight upset, in a fight where we're afterwards saying we wish we weren't putting Andre Fili on the cut list right now, but we are. You're muted. You're still mute.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh.
This is one of the fights I have a really hard time reading, and it simply just comes down to Andre Fili. Just there's things that he does that looks really good to me, and things that he does that looks really bad. He can fight on both stances. He's a counter striker. He uses feints to draw out attacks. Pretty quick hands. You've got a popping jab. He can strike while backing up. He likes to like a lot of fade back counters, like slip a shot and then come back with one. Good high kick. He loves that, like Robert Whittaker dipping to one side high kick. You mentioned he's got some decent power. I think he's an underrated wrestler. He needs to improve his top game. He isn't much of a submission threat, and he really struggles to get if he's put on his back. Bryce Mitchell took him down and held him down. But you got to worry about his chin. He was knocked out quick in his last fight. Algeo, he's this long and lengthy striker. He's a controlled pressure striker. He fights a lot like Stephen Thompson, where he kind of keeps his hands low and kind of counters, but not just counters, but he counters from weird angles. Like they come from all his punches come from like low by his hips. He attacks with good volume. He's got some nice combination. He adds kicks in his combination. He throws some really hard kicks. He loves to close the distance by like throwing like a flying knee. And he uses his size really well in the plum clinch, where he batters to the body and knees inside. He will look for some body lock takedowns. I've had this in my notes for a while. I was doing contender search. He throws a lot of head and arm throws, which I hate. But he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. If he's put on his back, he'll toss up a lot of submissions. If he doesn't get a submission, he uses the space well to get back to his feet, which I do like. But he's a weak defensive wrestler. I mean, he's been taken down 23 times in 6 UFC fights, which is really disturbing. And a lot of that is because he doesn't sprawl. He looks for Kimaras. He jumps on guillotines. But he did show some good submission defense against Herbert Burns, who's obviously really high decorated. I just agree with you, man. Like I see this fight. Like we usually have a pretty good agreement on how we see the fights. This comes down to me. What Andre Fili has left. The guy that like fought Dennis Bermudez. Now again, I'm going back years, but like the guy who fought Dennis Bermudez easily out-wrestles Algeo to victory. I'm not sure if that guy exists anymore. So, but I'm on the fence because you said that you think Algeo is a better grappler than Fili. I think he's making a submission threat, but I think Fili's a much better wrestler. Like I think Fili could easily just turn this into a wrestling match and win. And you said you think Fili has more power on the feet. I actually think Algeo might have more power on the feet. So this could be a really bad pick for Algeo if he's turned into a takedown dummy. But on the feet, his volume, his long range attacks, I think it might be too much for Fili at this point. Give me Aljo to overwhelm Feely with volume. Aljo by decision.
So 2 picks for Aljo by decision, but we arrive there by completely separate thought processes.
Well, I just think I think Feely's a better wrestler. I wonder if that's not there anymore. So I think at one point he was a better wrestler. I just don't know if it's there anymore.
And I probably didn't, say it as well as I should have then, because I think, like, in terms of credentials, he absolutely is. Like, he was a junior college wrestler. He's been an effective wrestler. My question is, will he realize that and do it? Because I just don't feel as though I don't trust him to come in with the right game plan to win the fight for himself.
It all started with when he started doing that terrible movie that nobody watched.
There have been a lot of terrible movies that nobody watched, but what was it? Like,
I don't know. Like, Uriah Faber was like the producer, director. So do you remember this? Like, Uriah Faber was the director. Oh yeah.
Oh, this sounds terrible.
Someone share this in the comments. Like, leave the link to the video. Ben,
please.
Like Ben's punishment because this fight wrong is to watch the video.
I'll watch it and I'll post a reaction video on the Show Dog YouTube page.
I didn't watch it. I know Uriah Faber was involved in directing or something.
This sounds terrible. I can't wait. We head to the women's bantamweight division next for a matchup between Aspen Ladd and Sarah McMahon. Ladd, the 27-year-old Californian, is 9-3 overall. She is 4-3 since joining the UFC as a standout in Invicta Fighting Championships. She is 4-2 as a bantamweight, as she did have a one-off bout at featherweight against Norma Dumont, which she lost. That was the headliner of UFC Fight Night 195 last October. She came back from that, faced Raquel Pennington at UFC 273 this April at bantamweight, and dropped a unanimous decision there as well. She will try to avoid the first 3-fight losing streak of her career against McMahon. The former bantamweight title challenger is 41 years old, from South Carolina, 13-6 overall, 7-6 in the UFC, and is coming off a win. She took a unanimous decision over Carl Hossa at UFC on ESPN Blades vs. Dawkins back in March. That allowed her to bounce back from her third-round submission loss to Juliana Pena last January, which actually served as Pena's springboard to history, of course. Odds on this one, pretty close, but Ladd is a slight favorite. She is -125. McMahon out there at even money or even +105 a few places. Keith, not a fight I would have expected, to see this far up a UFC card in late 2022, let alone with the kind of divisional implications it actually has. But here we are, and the thing's happening. It was originally scheduled for August 13th. It got bumped, I believe, due to an injury to McMahon. I don't remember exactly, though. But now it's happening in September. Who you got?
Yeah, this is a tough one. That's probably why the odds are so close. They're both pretty ho-hum kind of fighters at this point in their careers. McMahon, she, on the feet, I'd say she's a boxer on the feet. I'd say she's a serviceable boxer at best. She tends to fight behind a high guard defense. She doesn't throw any kicks. She has some pop in her feet, on her fists. That's kind of what she's got going through her, but there's not much there on the feet. She's an elite wrestler, but I've said this before, I'm going to say it again, that she won a silver medal in the Olympics. That was 18 years ago. Like, she's not a world-class wrestler anymore. She can shoot from the outside. She can get takedowns from the inside, so she kind of has that thing going. She will get in the clinch, tie up, double underhooks, and shoot like inside trips. She got some explosive entries. It's funny that I'm saying all this. I just want to say, like, yeah, she's an elite level wrestler for the UFC, not on the wrestling scene anymore. So that's kind of what I meant. And she gets a limb. She's so physically strong, and she knows like the perfect angles to kind of get the fight to the canvas. So she grabs a limb, smother and top control, hard ground and pound. We saw that in wins against Lena Landsberg. Even her last fight against Carol Hossa, she showed some pretty good ground and pound. But her submission defense is really bad. I mean, it's like the Achilles heel for her. Marion Renault submitted her. Kelly Vera submitted her. Giulia Pena submitted her. And she fades late, which is troublesome. And at 41, you don't expect to get better. Lad has not looked good since tearing her ACL. Now, maybe that's just facing some good competition on the return. Noma Dumont and Raquel Pennington getting thrown to the wolves after being off for a long time. Maybe she just simply hasn't improved as she's kind of gotten older, or maybe it's just her already limited athleticism has decreased when you take away, put a major injury on one of her legs. She's 27, so she's about in her prime years now. It's time for her to show what she's got, or if she is ever going to be what a lot of people expect her to be. And even the UFC kind of pushed her into main events fairly quick. She's a limited striker. She's pretty flat-footed on the feet. She's not a good athlete. She's a little slow. She lacks head movement. She does have some raw power, though, which I do like. She does keep everything tight and inside, which is good. She doesn't create many openings to get countered because of that. But I don't know, she likes to close distance, and she'll want to battle in the clinch, which is good. She's good in the clinch. She's a bit of a grinder. She's got some good top game, good top pressure if she gets down, and some of the best ground and pound in the game. And like we said it before, she has this crazy ex-girlfriend ground and pound going if she's on top. But she's not a good wrestler. I think her wrestling is really overrated. So this is a huge matchup for each. I mean, McMahon's window to be a title challenger, I mean, it's basically now or never. McMahon can't afford a loss to the rest of her career if she ever wants to be a UFC champion. Is she going to be a UFC champion? Highly unlikely, but she could have. This could be her glove to share moment. Lad has time, but this is a winnable fight for her. If McMahon was 10 years younger, I would pick her with some confidence. I just don't trust her fight IQ and her physical tools anymore and her cardio. And there's a lot of things I don't trust a 41-year-old who, I thought was retired 2 years ago. Yeah. And I'm worried about her ability to control Lad, and I'm worried about her, getting up early and then fading late and having Lad come back on it, which we've seen Lad do in the past. Now, however, strictly looking at X and O's, taking all the intangibles out, which you can't, but just strictly taking on X and O's, I think man might be just as good of a striker as Lad is, and I think she might be just as strong as Lad is, and she's the better technical wrestler. So, plus you add in the terrible weight cuts that Lad has had to do to make the weight class. I mean, she would drain herself and not even make the weight at all. I hate that. I'm going to go with a slight upset again. Give me, and I know this is one of the fights I know I'm picking wrong, but give me McMahon to put Lad on her back 3 times and win that decision.
Man, I feel exactly what you're laying down here. McMahon never quite. She never quite met the heights that we hoped she would. When this division was initiated into the UFC with the absorption of Strikeforce back in 2012, 2013, the collision course seemed to be, I can't wait until McMahon and Rousey fight. The bronze medal judoka versus the silver medal wrestler, the explosive plus athlete versus the woman with the most terrifying guns in the division. And when they finally met, you can argue that the stoppage was premature, but basically Ronda Rousey wrecked her with one knee to the midsection.
It looked like Cejudo against DJ won.
Yeah.
And the wrestler was pushed too quick.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it has been, but unlike Cejudo, McMahon since then hasn't been able to string together enough wins to get back into the title picture because her submission defense has never gotten better. Yeah. She's almost like a Hammer House throwback.
Yes.
How have you been training this for 10 years and your submission defense is still so bad? Lad at this point is a bust. That's it. She went from the future of the division to just another woman in the division to kind of in danger of washing out. She's lucky that one of her 2 losses in a row here was at featherweight because you pointed out, she's not looked the same since her ACL tear in 2020. And some fighters are never the same after that. But all that did is it may have taken the edge off of athleticism that was always a little overrated. Like, she's incredibly strong, but as just a straight fast twitch athlete, she isn't Macy Barber.
Nope.
Or Erin Blanchfield or Miranda Maverick. Like, she's like big and strong and powerful, but yeah, like it never ran off.
She's like a lesser athletic Raquel Pennington.
Yeah.
And honestly, if Raquel Pennington had poor boxing.
Yeah. And
it's not really a good comparison. It's like a flat-footed.
Raquel Pennington's, but I mean, to me, Raquel Pennington's defining positive trait is just endless guts. Like, she's just so tough.
Yeah.
And I've not seen that from Ladd either. Like, Ladd so far in her UFC run, and again, as you point out, like, I usually cushion the negative things I say about fighters, but in her UFC run so far, her most notable traits are looking like she's going to faint on the scale, actually fainting on the scale, and such a weirdly flat performance against Dumont that
terrible.
Her coach was the subject of controversy for like a week afterwards, just because he was trying to like
yell at her.
talk some life into her. I think the onus is on Ladd here to prove she has anything left to offer this division, and if she does, McMahon's actually the perfect opponent to show it against.
Absolutely.
You know, because she can out wrestle Sarah McMahon if she can do that. Just because McMahon is that depleted, just because Ladd is that well recovered, that's something she can stick in her cap. Like, she probably hits harder than McMahon. If things go to the ground, I mean, she's not Erin Blanchfield, but she's a good enough grappler. She has punishing ground and pound, which, I mean, sets up submissions, obviously. Like, when you're beating the crap out of somebody and they turn their back, well, you know, the neck's right there for you. McMahon has certainly given that to people.
If she puts McMahon on her back, McMahon's in trouble.
Yes. I mean, I understand why you pick McMahon here, because neither of these fighters inspire much confidence at this point in their careers. But I think there is a chance that Ladd has gotten better since the last time we saw her, whereas I don't see any reason why McMahon would be better since the last time. So unless I reserve the right to change this pick if Ladd blows weight or like collapses on the scale, because again, this is someone who, before she blew out her knee, the CSAC told her, you can't fight a bantamweight in California anymore.
Yeah.
Because you walked into the cage at like 154 pounds or whatever the freak it was. But give me Ladd. And when I say Ladd gets a second round finish, it's not because I think Ladd is that much better than McMahon, but just because if she's winning, I think it's going to be over quick. Whereas if McMahon's winning, we're going the whole 15 minutes. So give me Ladd. I'm going to say second round TKO on the ground, but a submission wouldn't surprise me either. I think it's going to be one of those choose your poison moments where she ends up on top and it's up to McMahon how she wants this thing to end.
Sometimes I wish that the UFC would promote like the old gimmicks of like the 1980s wrestling. Like if I had Sarah McMahon, I would just like have her wear a headband all the time, and like remember that, like, what was that thing the bodybuilders used to like stretch? You know what I'm talking about?
The thing with the three springs that you go like this?
Yeah. Oh. Like, she should just walk around with one of those all the time.
Oh, and she should be able to fight with like the ribbons tied around her biceps like the Ultimate Warrior to like make her veins stick out.
Yeah.
I mean,
either the stretch thing or the ones that they do with the forearms, they squeeze the little weight thing together.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. Like, they should just have those all the time.
Kind of like on that Hulk Hogan Saturday morning cartoon where like, he always had one of those things. Yeah. I'm for that. I mean, I always make an extra double special effort, like not to say creepy things on the Shillan and Duffy show, but McMahon with those arms. Pff. The UFC Fight Night 210 main card powers on with a heavyweight matchup between Tanner Boser and Rodrigo Nascimento. Boser, the 31-year-old Canadian, is 28-1 overall. He's 4-3 in the UFC. He did win his last time out. It was a second-round knockout of Ovince St. Preux at UFC Fight Night Gane versus Volkov all the way back last June. That allowed him to put the brakes on the first back-to-back losses of his UFC career, those coming against Andrei Arlovski and Ilir Latifi. He'll try to make it 2 wins in a row against Nascimento, the 29-year-old Brazilian who goes by Yogi Bear, and I fully support this nickname, is 8-1 with 1 no contest overall. He is 1-1 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC out of the 3rd season of Dana White's Contender Series. He has a win over Don'Tale Mayes, a loss to Chris Daukaus, and a win over Alen Baudot last July that was overturned when he tested positive for a banned stimulant. Specifically, he tested positive for methylphenidate, also known as Ritalin. I don't blame him for needing that to stay awake for an Alen Baudot fight, but that's neither here nor there. He is the moderate underdog here. He's plus 175, Boser minus 220, and kind of like the Nikolas Motta versus Cameron VanCamp fight, this is one that's been kicked down the road for a long time. This one was originally booked for April 23rd. Nascimento dropped out of the fight with an injury, so they brought in Alexander Romanov to face Boser, which that's not fair. Boser ended up dropping out, and Chase Sherman came in, and we ended up with Romanov fighting Chase Sherman on short notice. That whole fight ended up getting pushed back a week, but they ended up making Boser versus Nascimento anyway. So here it is, 5 months later. Keith, I guess what I want to know is who is
the best weight since Guns N' Roses' Chinese Democracy DVD came out. We waited 15 years for.
We waited 15 years for this.
This
album is terrible.
I actually kind of liked it.
Oh, worth the wait. Well, the Chinese Democracy of heavyweight fights, much like, we asked ourselves, is this Guns N' Roses? Like, this has got like Buckethead, and it's got a guy from Nine Inch Nails on it. It's got,
Oh God!
Now,
is Tanner Boser the face underneath Buckethead?
Yes, it is. I mean, who is Tanner Boser? Because 2 years ago,
that was pretty good. I can recall that was pretty good.
2 years ago, he was right in there with the, Chris Daukaus, Surreal Gone, just Alexander Romanov kind of up and coming class. He was. I mean, he'd given Gane a pretty decent fight. He had been physically transforming from fight to fight. Like he lost like 30 pounds.
Yeah.
And he turned into he knocked out Felipe Lins and Rafael Pessoa. Neither of those wins has aged super well, but how he looked in those wins was promising.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, he was light on his feet. He was faster than all these guys. He was throwing volume with surprising power. Lins wasn't able to get him down. Like, he looked like, then that guy ran into Andrei Arlovski, and Andrei Arlovski ruins everything. Because he turns every fight into an Andrei Arlovski fight, and sometimes those guys get Andrei Arlovski hangover, and their next couple fights continue to be Andrei Arlovski fights. It's like they get Arlovski PTSD, and they're like, no, if I throw more than 8 strikes around, I'm going to get tired or something bad is going to happen. Yeah. So his fight against Ilir Latifi was the same. It was awful. And he beat Ovince St. Preux, but Ovince St. Preux is just terrible at heavyweight. Like, it's like, I didn't learn anything from that.
He's been pretty bad at light heavyweight for a while, too, now. He's just done. And
so all Boser really got from that was to keep his job. If he has anything to prove, if he's still a factor, and at 31, he is still a baby by heavyweight standards. Like, at 31, you can argue he hasn't reached his peak, even physically. And if he has reached his peak, he could probably do it for another 10 years. So he's got the room to prove it. Just the question is, how is he going to do against someone in Nascimento that I think he's more athletic than Boser. Like, Boser ended up being kind of surprisingly light on his feet, surprisingly fast hands, surprisingly good gas tank. Nascimento is a plus athlete for heavyweights. He is a persistent takedown artist, and he is a nasty grappler once they get there. So this feels like kind of a 2 true outcomes fight to me, because if Boser gets what he wants, he's going to keep this thing standing and sting Nascimento all night. And you'll know it was a Tanner Boser fight if at the end Boser's kind of like breathing a little heavy, but Nascimento is like bruised and busted up around the face from like eating Boser's jab all night. If Nascimento gets what he wants, I think he taps Boser out in the first round and a half. That's kind of...
That's exactly how I see it. or lands a big haymaker.
Yeah, or lands a big haymaker, which it's interesting because it's clearly for him a means to kind of close distance, make his opponent like flinch and set him up for a body lock, or at least to clinch and run him to the fence and take him down that way. But he ends up knocking people out almost by accident just by landing it on him because he hits hard. It's another slight upset, but again, it's been 2 years since I've seen anything from Tanner Boser that really, really impressed me. And I mean, that's ages ago to me. Nascimento's, he got blasted by Chris Daukaus, but Boser doesn't have that power.
Or speed.
Or speed. Like, Boser's kind of quick.
He looks like he should.
Yeah.
Of the two, he looks like he should be fast paced now.
Yeah. But yeah, Daukaus has some of the faster hands in the division. And, again, like Bordeaux is not good, but Nascimento whooped him. I think he has all the momentum here. And again, it's kind of on Boser to prove that he is the guy he was 2 years ago. That he's at least the use your illusion 1 and 2 version, if not like, if not appetite for destruction. But I mean, he's definitely not appetite for destruction.
Yeah, that's like Francis Ngannou. Come on, man. That's an all timer. That's an all timer, my man.
But yeah, give me that.
Use Your Illusion was, just side note, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 was pretty dope too.
No, they were.
Guns N' Roses is my favorite all time band, so that's why I said I like the Chinese Democracy one.
They were great, but I don't like Chinese Democracy, and I don't like Tanner Boser in this fight. Give me Nascimento by second round submission.
Yeah, I'm gonna do this. So there's 15 fights. There's only so much time a week. Sometimes this is what I do. I kind of write down all the fights in a row. I kind of start with which one am I most interested in. I kind of go after that one. Usually guys who are making their debuts, I try to do those for someone, and then I kind of work my way. This was dead last on my list to do a tape study. So it's the one I didn't get to. I didn't do a single second of tape study. One guy has a power advantage. One guy has a grappling advantage. Tanner Boser has the jab and move advantage. Like, give me the guy that has two options to win. So I'm with you, man. I'm gonna take the upset. So I'll just do this prediction, kind of like the 10,000 other previews out there. Just do it real quick. I'll get this guy. I think he hits harder and he's a better grappler. So I'll go with the upset with you.
Awesome. How does he get it done?
What did you say first?
I said second round submission.
I'll say I'll say decision.
Okay.
I see he holds on. I see he wins the first 2 rounds, fades late, and holds on.
Third from the top at UFC Vegas 60, at least as the card is currently set up, is a middleweight matchup between Chidi Njokuani and Gregory Rodriguez. And Njokuani, the 33-year-old American of Nigerian descent, by way of Vegas, is 22-7 with 1 no contest overall. He is 2-0 since joining the UFC out of the 5th season of Dana White's Contender Series. On the Contender Series, he knocked out Mario Felipe de Souza in the 3rd round, and since then, he has put in about 5 minutes of total work. He knocked out Marc-Andre Barriault in 16 seconds in his UFC debut in February, came back in May, and knocked out Dusko Todorovic late in the 1st round with a brutal elbow. He's going to try to keep the good vibes going against Rodriguez. The 30-year-old Brazilian with the 48-year-old face is 12-4 overall. He is 3-1 since joining the UFC out of the 4th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He actually lost on the Contender Series, got knocked out by Jordan Williams. So we went to LFA, won a couple fights, but since joining the UFC, again, 3-1. He's beaten Dusko Todorovic, beaten Junyong Park, dropped a split decision to Armen Petrosian. That was back in February, then bounced back from that in June, knocking out Julian Marquez in the 1st round at UFC on ESPN Cater versus Emmett. This one is one of the closer fights on the books. Rodriguez minus 120, and Njokuani available at even money plus 100 as the very slight underdog. Keith, this on some level is a classic style matchup. I mean, Njokuani a striker, and not just an MMA striker, but a guy with like dozens and dozens of Muay Thai, fights on his record, versus Rodriguez, who, I mean, obviously he will strike, but talks about himself as a grappler, and certainly that's where his original credentials are. How does this play out, and who wins?
Yeah, this is an intriguing fight that if you told me to pick 2 years ago, I'd have said Rodriguez smokes him. I love this late career surge. I mean, he's not that old, but I mean, like, nobody was expecting Chidi and Njokuani to kind of make this kind of run in the UFC years ago when he was in Bellator.
No.
Even the UFC
just real quick, like we've talked about people like Chris Curtis. I was more surprised when Njokuani got to the UFC than when Chris Curtis did, because I never expected Njokuani to get called by Dana White's Contender Series. I mean, he was like 32 years old and had like 30 career fights.
Wasn't six? Yeah, I mean, Andre Filo is a guy that kind of had a nice run in the UFC too. That like wasn't kind of expected, but he was like younger. Like nobody, like even though the UFC broadcast makes it seem like MMA fans been calling for Chidi to make his UFC debut, like we were calling for Fedor to come to the UFC. He's a long and lengthy fighter. He's got like 80-inch reach, and he's become this. He was always a good striker, but he become this like deadly striker in the UFC. I love that he started like adding inside elbows to his game. He's very poised. I love that he switches stances in mid attack. He used to have a little low output in Bellator, but that is not the case since he come to UFC. He comes out aggressive, throwing big power shots. He's got I don't want to say elite power, but he's got like big power. I like that he gets to the clinch, uses his size in there. He's an underrated grappler. I mean, he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He out-grappled Mario Souza on the Dana White Contender Series. He almost caught Dusko Todorovic and Anaconda in his last fight. He's a weak defensive wrestler, but he showed his ability against Todorovic to get back up to his feet, and he showed some really ground and pound in his fight against Mario Souza. Now, Rodriguez, we talk about guys being big. I mean, he's a middleweight, looks like a heavyweight. He's huge. And he's pretty well-rounded. He's extremely aggressive on the feet. He fights like he's shot out of cannon. Like, he comes out throwing big bombs with both of his hands. He likes to slide in the pocket and load some big looping power shots. But he's been tagged and hurt a few times so far in the UFC. You mentioned his grappling, though. He's a really good grappler. He gets in the clinch and pummels, gets in underhooks, good throws and trips inside. He can shoot some solid entries, though sometimes he does duck his head a little bit. He kind of reaches. He's asking to get uppercut, asking to get kneed. But if he gets your legs, he's so physically strong that he's going to pick you up. He's going to slam you. Mean ground and pound. He's a legit submission threat. But the one thing I don't like, he loses position chasing submissions, which is troublesome. And because he throws everything powerful, he tends to fade a little late. So this to me really comes down to how Rodriguez fights. If he closes the distance and out-muscles Chidi, he can win like in a grueling affair that eventually finds a submission or just kind of wins a fight. I could also see him like getting ahead and fading late and trying to like hold on. Like I wouldn't be shocked if we get a draw where he wins the first 2 rounds and Chidi comes out and he gets like a 10-8 round in the third. But if he stands and he throws wild shots with Chidi, yeah, he could catch Chidi, but there's also a good chance he gets starched. And the other thing is if he fades late, I can see Chidi put him away, especially if he's like overextended on takedowns, he eats a knee or an uppercut. And actually, I think that's what's going to happen. I think Chidi's going to catch him. So I'm shocked that I was picking this fight like years ago that I would pick Chidi by knockout, but I'm going to take Chidi to win by second round TKO.
There are some of these shows where we pick almost identically all the way through. There are others where, one of us picks a ton of upsets and the other doesn't. Here, we're seeing a lot of the same upsets. And it's
my fourth upset in a row I picked. I picked 6 of them. It's 4 in a row.
I agree with everything you said about Njokuani. Like, he was a frustrating fighter in Bellator, and I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that he may have been killing himself to make welterweight.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he's 6'3" and not skinny. Like, if you're cutting that kind of weight, that can sap your output just because you're concerned about your gas tank. And then, kind of when he hit his ceiling in their middleweight division, it was against people like John Salter and Rafael Carvalho, where he knew that they wanted to get him onto the ground. And I think that may have blunted some of his output as well. But yeah, he went from a frustrating borderline contender, almost contender, also ran in, Bellator, to he's got a ways to go, but he's looked pretty promising so far in the UFC. And I see the dynamic here against Rodriguez the same way you do. If Rodriguez is able to get inside, physically bully him, and Njokuani has great technique in the clinch, and as you pointed out, he's added some inside elbows that have served him well. They certainly did against Todorovic. But generally speaking, if Rodriguez can force the fight at that range, I think that's in his, that's to his advantage. And certainly if it goes to the ground, it's to Rodriguez's advantage. And Njokuani's ground game is underrated, but Rodriguez is, I think, at a different level there. But Rodriguez's aggression, his defensive lapses on the feet are all tailor-made for Njokuani to hurt him bad. And like you, I'm picking that to happen. You picked second round. That's actually where I was going, and I'm not going to be different just for the sake of being different. I've got Njokuani by second round KO as well, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if Rodriguez wins the first round. But, you start the second round fresh.
Yeah.
Only Njokuani's a little more fresh, and you're on the feet. Rodriguez comes wading forward again, and Njokuani just either times a level change and catches him with a knee, or he catches him with his chin way in the air, over swinging on something, and just plunks him. So yeah, give me Njokuani by second round knockout as well. That brings us to the main event of UFC Fight Night 210, a bantamweight matchup between Corey Sandhagen and Song Yadong. Sandhagen, the 30-year-old Coloradan, is 14-4 overall. He is 7-3 in the UFC. He is on a 2-fight losing streak, though in his defense, those have come against TJ Dillashaw and Petr Yan, and both of them were pretty competitive. He lost a split decision to Dillashaw in Dillashaw's return fight last July. That was the headliner of UFC on ESPN 27. He came back last October and faced Yan for the interim bantamweight title, dropping a unanimous decision. That was at UFC 267. He will try to avoid having it be 3 in a row and trying to keep himself in the title conversation against the surging Yadong. The 24-year-old from China is 19-6-1 with 1 no contest overall. He is 8-1-1 in the UFC. He is on a 3-fight win streak, those being a unanimous decision over Casey Kenny last August, a second-round knockout of Julio Arce last November, and most recently, a 2-minute blitzing of Marlon Moraes at UFC Fight Night Santos versus Ankalaev this March. Odds are surprisingly, well, I can't say surprisingly, they're surprisingly wide to me. Sandhagen, despite the losing streak, is -210. Song, despite the win streak, is +170, perhaps reflecting that this is a step up in competition for one of them and a step down for the other. Nonetheless, fantastic main event of the kind we never would have got during the Joe Silva era of UFC matchmaking when winners fought winners and losers fought losers. But here it's a chance for a long-time fringe contender to take a serious step up the ladder. It is a chance for an existing contender to stay atop the ladder. Keith, how does this fight play out? Who wins? And yeah, and if you got any insights on what it means for them in the division, feel free to share those, but let me know how you think the fight goes.
Yeah, so as far as the odds, the odds don't affect me how I make my pick at all. I think we both proved tonight we're willing to take big upsets. I was thinking how I would expect the odds. I would expect Sandhagen -140. I mean, he's the bigger name. He's faced the bigger guys. So what -140 would be about what I'd expect, being that the bigger name, and +125 or something like that for Yadong. As far as relevance to the division, they were grooming Sandhagen to be a star. I mean, he's the guy that fought Dillashaw in Dillashaw's return. He's getting. Sorry, my dog is really grabbing my microphone. Sorry. He's like a good-looking guy. He's charismatic. He's fun to watch. So there's a lot
fights are exciting.
His fights are exciting. So, and Yadong obviously has that Asian market, specifically China market, that they've been trying to get in forever. Not get in, but you know what I'm saying? Like really trying to have they want a Yao Ming type. Like they want that international star from China. So it has relevance in that there's so many guys in the division that it's going to be a while to get a title shot. That if you lose, and I kind of like referred to this in the beginning, like if you lose now, you're kind of going way back. And Yadong, if he wins, he has a strong argument to kind of not only obviously leapfrog Sandhagen, but leapfrog a couple other guys, particularly Marlon Vera. You can say, yeah, that's cool. Marlon Vera's in a nice position. I beat Marlon Vera. Yeah, a lot of people think Marlon Vera won, but regardless, it wasn't a robbery either way. It was a very close fight.
No,
So
if I discount that for anything, it's that it was at 145. But either way, he was the better fighter that night.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it was really close. Yeah, that's a good point. So that's the argument in the ranking sense. But the whole point is like he would have a win over Vera. He'd have a win over Sandhagen. He has the China thing. We saw Weili Zhang when she first got her title shot, kind of fast tracked up the rankings. If he wins a close decision, it's a back and forth. He's picking them apart from the outside. No, but if he like starches Sandhagen or puts on like a 50-45 performance, he could be on the fast track. He could be the guy surprising like, oh wow, Henry Cejudo's waiting. Oh wow, he's fighting Sterling or Dillashaw. Sandhagen is just simply just a. Yeah, you could argue that he could have won the Dillashaw fight. He had moments in the Petroyan fight, but eventually you have to get your hand raised. You got to do something to show that you win. So, and it's just a fantastic stylistic matchup. In my opinion, the best division in the UFC right now, and possibly all of MMA. So, as far as who's going to win, man, Sandhagen is long and lengthy, and he's so fluid. He's one of the most fluid guys in the UFC. He's got incredible movement. He can switch stances and he's just as effective from the southpaw as he is from the orthodox. He uses feints, but what I like about him, what I've talked about a lot of guys on the undercard does a lot of things that Sandhagen does well, but he like groups these things together. Like a lot of things I said about other guys, he has them all. I like that he uses feints to keep you guessing, but then he just touches. He doesn't waste energy. He touches. He throws at like 80% or 70% power, and then when an opening comes, that's when he's blasting the openings. I like that he goes to the body. I like that he throws these knees. Like he understands his length. He understands how easy it is for a tall guy to use his knees. Kicks when he's working from the outside. Great kicks. Good calf kicks. And I think he has he has that tall man's power where he can hurt a lot of guys. I mean, he starts guys. He's a solid wrestler. So much variety in his game that stands out to me. Whether it's going to the body, whether it's doing a flying knee, whether it's like a bouncing in and out and then a check hook, and then working behind a jab, and then kicking from range, and then it's now getting inside and looking for an elbow or going for a takedown. He's a solid wrestler. Some really good scrambles. Good get-up games. He's really hard to hold down. He showed that against like Dillashaw. And then, again, just the way he just kind of keeps you guessing. Flying knee knockout against Frankie Edgar, with a spinning wheel kick against Marlon Moraes. Yadong is he's really, really a well-rounded fighter. He's a guy who's really coming into his power. He's a poise striker, high output, very technically sound. He throws accurate, straight shots, not a lot of tells, really good snap. Looks so good in his recent fights. As I mentioned, nice jab, follows with good power shots. I like that he goes to the body and he attacks with combinations. Kicks are good. Fast kicks, calf kicks. I like that he can sneak in a takedown. We talk about the Marlon Vera fight. He showed his intelligence by winning close rounds by getting takedowns. He's a good overall grappler. He's got 3 submission wins, and he's hard to hold down. If you take him down, he's got a good get-up game. And what I love, like it is a big step up in competition for him. But as he's taken steps up, like his cardio just looks better. Like his cardio helped him win against Casey Kenny, and then really did against Marlon Vera. He didn't slow down at all in his fight against Marlon Vera. So as a prediction goes, I actually think Yadong is a more technically sound fighter. I would not be surprised if Yadong's speed and power is just too much for Sandhagen. But Sandhagen's strategy, I mean, it's got to be to stick and move, never be a stationary target, never stay directly in front of Yadong, kind of keep him guessing, keep attacking with different things, sneak in a takedown, even if you can't hold it down, just to kind of win rounds, and just try to use a lot of kicking game from the outside. But regardless, I think it's going to be a war. I think both guys are going to have moments. I think it's going to be one of these fights that one guy wins, but like the stock of the loser doesn't really fall, especially if Yadong is the loser. I say Sandhagen wins a really, really close decision. One of these ones where we might be headed into the last round saying, oh, man, who's going to win this round? But overall, Sandhagen, he's fought the better guys. He's been in the bigger fights. He's gone 25 minutes. He showed that he has the cardio to go that hard. I'll go with Sandhagen by decision.
Yeah, I feel everything you're putting down there, and I would say that if Song wins, that does hurt Sandhagen more than the opposite does, simply because right now Sandhagen can say, yeah, I've lost 3 fights out of my last 5 or 6, but they've been against what might literally be the top 3 guys in the division: Aljamain Sterling, Petr Yan, TJ Dillashaw. That's it. And I was competitive against Yan and Dillashaw. If he loses to Song, then it is that step where, okay, I'm not thrust back into Gen Pop, but I'm just another top 10 guy. I mean, it's almost the thing that happened to Frankie Edgar, where he kept on losing, but you could say, well, he's only lost to the top 2 guys. Well, now he's only lost to like 3 of the top 5. Now he's only lost to 4 of the top 7. And before you know it, like Edgar's lost 4 or 5 fights.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Sandhagen's. Yeah. So Sandhagen could use a win here. It would really establish that, okay, this is not a changing of the guard yet. I got to regroup. But, if TJ Dillashaw is your champ a year from now, no one's that shocked. And I have a pretty good case, for a shot against him if I can string together some wins. If Song wins, I think it looks a little like Jan's win over Sandhagen. Like I think the general plan he's going to need to follow. Like, make sure that the boxing is at his range. Use wrestling. Don't lean on it in every round, but use it judiciously throughout to win you parts of rounds and to kind of set you up to be able to get into your preferred range. When Jan was able to do that, he won rounds pretty easily. Like, he won the middle 3 rounds, no question.
Yeah.
He definitely lost the first. The last round is kind of that swing round. So whether you think Sandhagen won 1 round or 2 rounds, the pattern was laid out there. That's a game plan that Yadong would need to follow and could follow. I just don't know if he does. This is a step up for him from the type of guys he's been fighting against. I like the way you described Sandhagen, the way he flows on offense. At his best, when he's really getting revved up and he's really in the rhythm, there are moments that remind me of a more diverse Max Holloway. Like Max Holloway with more funky stuff thrown in without just that, not the relentless pace, but where just, he seems to have a perfect grasp on what the range is and be able to throw the perfect strikes. He's switching stances mid-strike to help manage the distance and keep it at his preferred distance. I could see him doing that to Yadong for at least 3 rounds out of 5. But while both these guys have power, I think if this fight turns on, well, either a knockout or on a single fight altering strike that changes the whole tenor of the fight. I think it's probably coming from Yadong, not from Sandhagen.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'm picking Sandhagen, but I'm going to be nervous the whole time, even though I don't have any money on it. So give me Sandhagen by decision. I agree also that it'll be an absolute war and just a really fascinating fight, but it'll be just a little too much too soon for someone in Yadong that is clearly still improving enormously from fight to fight. That has been the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 210, Sandhagen versus Song, also known as UFC Vegas 60. If you are watching us for the first time, first of all, thank you. We appreciate it. We hope you enjoyed it. We think we provide as good a blend of actual analysis, historical asides, and goofball fun as any you'll find in this industry. Please do give us a subscribe, give us a like, leave us a comment. Keith and I both respond to those. We love to hear your disagreement as well as any agreement you have. But most importantly, join us for the recap. We will be live 10 or 15 minutes after the main event on the Sherdog YouTube page, where we will break down all of these fights in reverse order of how we just did it now. We'll start from the main event, work our way all the way down to the surprisingly good first prelim. We will talk about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. I guarantee you there will be something. And the live chat is open that whole time. So we are taking your questions, your comments, your hot takes, and we have quite an interactive group of fans there that want to share what they know and make each other laugh. We would love to have you join them. In between then and now, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy the fights.